Let's go! LSU football fans, the state of Louisiana for the class of 2022 is legendary. But how important is the state of Texas going to be? Because we want Devon Campbell. We want Denver Harris. We want the one-time LSU commit Bryce Anderson. There is an interesting dynamic, though, going on with Sark, Jimbo, and the entire state, and we need to evaluate it closely. So if you are a diehard LSU football fan, in today's video, we are going to break down how important the state of Texas actually is for LSU football. So if you like deep dives such as this one, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check out some of our live streams. Let's get to it. So stick with me. We're going to go through a lot of data and analysis, and it's going to be coming at you quickly. So you're looking right now at the 4- and 5-star prospects in the state of Louisiana since the early decade. And as you could see, the state of Louisiana has more 4-stars ever. More 4-stars ever. They have the most 4-stars that they've had in quite some time. 18, I could see them touching that over 20 number because these kids are just getting better and better and better. And there are some 3-stars that some of you guys like a lot. But today we're just going to focus on the 4- and 5-star recruits and compare it to the state of Texas. Now, you just saw the Louisiana numbers. Now, here are the Louisiana numbers compared to the state of Texas. And as you can tell, there are so many more kids in a more populated area, and the state of Texas is loaded. Now, how important is it that LSU gets kids from the state of Texas? Well, it is very important, and we're going to show you the history as to why. But Steve Sarkisian could actually be a good thing for LSU. So let's first discuss if Texas is actually a really good thing for LSU. And the short answer to that question is obviously yes, whether it be Matt Flynn or Saron Black. You can mention any LSU Texas legend. Now, we will get into the dynamic with Jimbo, Saban, Sark, and Orgeron. It is a very real thing. But let's take a look at how important Texas was for LSU's recent success. And by recent, I mean since 2012. So, as you can see here, Daniil Hunter, Corey Thompson, both solid starters. Neither one of them, though, were the elite Texas prospects. Then in 2013, you get none. All right. Then in 2014 is when we actually strike some real gold here with Jamal Adams, 5-star out of Texas. That was such a legendary piece for LSU. So 2015, another Tuema, a big bust, but he was a 5-star. And Toby Weathersby, once again, a top 15 Texas prospect, a killer for LSU, multiple-year starter. 2016, Eric Monroe didn't work out. LSU was kind of loaded at safety. He played occasionally in 2018 and 2019, transferred to Texas Tech. D. Anderson, the same thing, got beat out by better players, didn't want to be a role player. He packed his bags and left. And so then you get to 2017, and I want you to remember 2 years, and we're going to get back to it. The 2017 recruiting class is the greatest recruiting class LSU has ever had. And that was in large part because they had some 3-stars turn out to be legends, Clyde and Justin. But LSU crushed the state of Texas in 2017. And take a look. 4 of the 5 starters, really good national championship players. Now, none of these top 4 are like all-time LSU legends, but they were very good. You probably don't win the national championship if you don't get all 4 of these guys. Then in 2018, as you can see, none of the elite Texas prospects, they all turned out to not be very good. You guys know Chaisson from our film studies really struggled last season. So overall, a whiff year here. Hopefully Chaisson turns out to be spectacular this year. Now, you were able to get a 5-star edge in Marcel Brooks in 2019. Was a very good rotational player as a true freshman on a national championship team. So that was a huge pickup. But then once again, some adversity hit. He packed his bags. Bo Pelini came in and he left. Now, 2020, it's a little too early to say anything about these three guys. But in 2021, you get a good class here as well. Once again, way too early to know about Garrett Nussmeier and Landon Jackson. Now, as you can see there, lots of really good players. So this was some really masterful recruiting because in 2017, LSU was going through some transition. It was the very early stages of the Ed Orgeron regime, and they were still able to put together a really good recruiting class with 3 of the top 15 players and 5 Texas players overall. The only other year where LSU had more than 4 since 2012 was 2014. Now, those 2 years have one thing in common. Texas was going through a regime change. It was Charlie Strong's first year in 2014 and then Tom Herman in 2017. And when you actually go look at the crop of Texas talent, you see a trend. So look at all these studs. Marvin Wilson, Florida State. Jeff Okuda, Ohio State. J.K. Dobbins, Ohio State. Anthony Hines, the one top 15 guy that Texas A&M got. Terrell Shavers, the one top 15 guy that Alabama got. But notice you see USC, Stanford, Michigan, Oklahoma State. Tylan Wallace actually turned out to be pretty good. So yes, Texas was able to get Sam Ehlinger in that class, but overall, they got crushed. But not only notice the absence of Texas, the absence of Texas A&M is also very interesting because the Jimbo recruiting train didn't quite get moving until 2019 and then in 2020, and they were able to pull out a pretty good class in 2021. So not only was Texas hurting, Texas A&M hadn't quite started getting the elite guys. Now, answer this question. Would you rather the elite guys go to Texas or Texas A&M and Alabama? Well, the answer to that is pretty obvious. You want them to go to Austin. So you see here, Denver Harris, elite of the elite, 5-star. That's a guy LSU is desperately after, as are all the big schools here. So Denver Harris already listed his top 4. These are his top 4 schools right here: Alabama, LSU, Texas, Texas A&M. So you then look at Devon Campbell, a 5-star offensive guard. LSU's been all over this since day one. And Texas, Oklahoma are his other schools. He listed a top 8 recently, and LSU made the list, but LSU wasn't on the graphic. Whatever. Then we moved to Bryce Anderson, who was once an LSU commit. LSU has already let it be known that they want more safeties into the fold, and Durante Jones has already been in contact with Bryce Anderson. Now, this is where it gets fascinating. When you look at a lot of these kids and their top schools, you notice a consistent top 4 of Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, and Alabama. The reason why you want Sark to do well, if LSU doesn't get a Texas prospect and they don't go to Texas, oftentimes in recent years they go to Texas A&M or Alabama, your direct SEC West rivals. That is not what you want to happen. You would much rather them go to Texas, who is not in your conference, and you will not play them on your non-conference schedule anytime soon. The only way you'll play Texas is if you meet in the bowl game, which is obviously a very random thing. If you meet them in the playoff, there's so many different things that can happen. So you'd rather theoretically not play these guys at all instead of play every single year. So if Sark does better, well, that means that he's going to be getting a lot more Texas guys, which is a good thing for LSU because LSU's Louisiana in-state talent is not only going to be great in 2022, it's going to be fantastic in 2023. So if Sark can eat into what has been a very profitable, very fruitful venture for Jimbo and Saban in the Lone Star State, that is really good news for Ed Orgeron. Here's a good example. In 2019, Texas A&M was able to get one of these 5-star kids, DeMarvin Leal. Now, DeMarvin Leal in 2014 probably wouldn't have taken Texas A&M, but Jimbo got this train moving. And if you watched our LSU versus Texas A&M film study, no one player tore LSU apart quite like DeMarvin Leal. Like, he was pulverizing us in the trenches. That obviously hurt LSU's chances to win that game. So, look, the same thing not only applies for, Texas, you also want Ohio State to do well in the state of Texas. Now, as many of you guys know, Texas A&M, their success is going to be mostly based on kids out of the state of Texas. And as you can see here, a lot of these kids haven't played yet, but they're still very early in their process. You do not want to see this. You don't want to see A&M. You want to see Stanford. You want to see Illinois. You want to see these schools that you're never going to play. Now let's move to 2020. Oh, here we go in 2020, and that's not good. You don't want the elite guys going to Texas A&M, Alabama, or Auburn. You'd rather them go to Georgia, who you don't have to play every year. And you take a look, A&M crushing it in state, right? Now let's go to 2021, where it begins to get really troublesome. Now don't get it twisted. I'm happy in 2021 LSU was able to get Nuss and Landon Jackson. But as you can see here, Alabama, A&M crushing it in the state of Texas. Bryce Foster, who LSU missed out on, who I think is going to be a really good guard. And look, once again, some obvious wins here with Landon Jackson, but, you see a lot of these really good players going to A&M and Alabama. So now, let's go look at the 2022 crop overall. You move down here, Denver Harris, a crystal ball to Texas. Devon Campbell, a crystal ball to Texas. As you can see here, you'd rather them go to Texas or Ohio State, where Quinn Ewers is slated to go as of right now, along with Caleb Burton. And you see, as you move on here, you see more Texas A&M, but you want them to go to Oklahoma, Texas, Clemson, and schools such as that one. You don't want to see these guys going to your SEC West rivals. So, yes, you do want to get these players, including Brian Allen Jr. I think I said Byron earlier, so I'm sorry, but Brian Allen Jr., who is out of Aledo, Texas. This is a guy that will more than likely not flip back to LSU, but at least he's going to the Big 12 where you don't have to worry about him. So let's wrap this entire thing into a nice, tight package. Does LSU and Ed Orgeron need kids from the state of Texas to win national championships? Well, yes, of course they do, because there are so many great players from the state of Texas that have helped LSU in prior years. Now, it is true that LSU does well in Florida and Georgia and California. Heck, LSU's greatest player ever is from the state of Ohio. So, yes, LSU is able to go wherever to get the elite guys. But, of course, Texas has guys that can help get you to the next level. Also, no matter how you cut it, the state of Louisiana will always be dominated by LSU. The Tigers are the only Power 5 school in the state, and of course that helps out immensely considering how many great players come out of the state, especially if you consider per capita population and all of that. That is such a huge advantage that will never be taken away. And Texas, if the Longhorns are great and a national power, look, I don't like Texas. I think burnt orange is just gross. However, it is a good thing if they're at least relevant, because as great as LSU has been in Texas, Alabama's been better, and of course Texas A&M's been better. You want these guys going to A&M. You want Dave Aranda to get some guys to Baylor and TCU with Gary Patterson and so on and so on. So it's kind of a weird thing. You don't want to face the DeMarvin Leals, the Malik Sillas, the elite guys out of these last couple of crops, the JoJo Earls, the Tommy Brockermeyers that have gone to your top SEC West rivals. Boom! Hope you enjoyed today's video. Of course, on live streams, we get even deeper into discussions, so make sure you don't miss out on those. Every Tuesday night at 7 Central, and of course, this next Friday, if you're watching, the next live stream will be on a Friday, March 5th. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! I think we're doing takeout tonight. Some chicken teriyaki hibachi. Let's go!